And welcome on into the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. As always, he is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. Make sure if you're watching the show on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod, you are subscribed. And if you're listening to the show wherever you do get your pods, same name, Blue Horseshoe Podcast, make sure you're subscribing. Do us out, help us out here, and make sure you're not missing any episodes as we get into a very exciting time. Because, George, we have seen something this week. We have seen all but two snaps. I think last year, one snap, all of last year, and that's Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr. Now they're in helmets and t-shirts in OTAs. Let's not get too crazy, but it is something, George, that outside of two snaps we've never seen before. All three of those guys on the field at the same time. You were there in person at Colts practice on Wednesday. Give us a sights. What it looked like. How pretty was it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's just comforting, right? Because for one thing, Jonathan Taylor is on the field and is participating and is happy. His smile is back. None of last year's drama has carried over at all, which is expected because really it went away. I feel like it went away the moment he stepped on the field for regular season last year. And he did a really good job of just sort of putting that aside and ending it. Richardson on the field and happy and healthy after last year and the way everything went with him. So that's another really positive development. And then, I think Michael Pittman's entering a stage where, at least for the next 4 years, he's got to be even more of a leader for this team. Reggie Wayne kind of mentioned it a week ago that, one of the things that Pitt hasn't done yet, obviously hasn't been to the Pro Bowl, um, has only got the one playoff game. I mean, those are things that are going to be very high goals for the team and for himself, but he hasn't got that C on his chest yet. He hasn't been voted a captain by his teammates. And he's a guy who takes a lot of pride in leadership and in being, at the forefront, especially that young receiver room. And I think now that he's one of the highest paid players on the team and he's one of the most veteran guys, not just in the receiver room, but on the offense. I mean, outside of the offensive line, he's probably the number one tenured guy on this offense. So, well, tied with Taylor because they came in at the same time. But I think that makes that trio even more important than it normally has been. I mean, you want to see a full season from Jonathan Taylor. You want to see Richardson stay healthy. And you want to see Pittman can take that next step, become, you know, even closer to one of the top wide receivers in the league. So, like you said, you're in shorts and pads, you're not going to tell, or shorts and helmets, you're not going to tell a ton from this. And it was a second practice of OTAs. So, not only is it not really all that intense, or usually we'll get to that later, not only is it, it's fresh for all these guys.
Mm-hmm.
That chemistry restarts every year to some extent. I mean, it comes back pretty fast, but they haven't had 40 snaps together even,
Right.
let alone 100 or, 1,000 or 10,000 is the, what it takes to become an expert. So you're going to start to see more and more of it later. But I mean, there's obviously a smoothness between Pittman and Richardson that wasn't there this time last year that's already grown. It's interesting to watch. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but I don't think it's not a trick play. They can't use it in a game. So I think I'm okay. They've been using two balls when they have Richardson and Taylor together in individual drills, so that he's given the ball, but he's also running or he's throwing. And uh, I mean, that would be an interesting wrinkle from Steichen. And I'll tell you right now, if we see them try to go for a rule change, and it's going to take away one of the coaching like cliches, right? There's only one ball. Well, not in practice. There's two. So
That's the old hidden ball trick. Bring it from baseball to football now.
yeah, so they both have. I think that's going to be pretty tough to stop. I mean, you hear all the time the defense can't be right. They literally can't be right in this situation. But that's I think that's them doing that in individual drills. I think is showing how much they're working on that mesh between Taylor and Richardson and wanting to make sure that, defense doesn't know where the ball is going. And obviously they're both such huge threats that I think that's what everybody's looking forward to. Didn't see a lot of that in teamwork, partly because there wasn't a lot of teamwork. I mean, they did, I don't know, probably 50 snaps total in 7-on-7 or 11-on-11. And then that split up obviously between the first and second team. And they got Sam Ellinger in there a little bit, at the end of each of those periods. So it's still, I think more than anything, it's just that planting that seed of, what's possible. It's been in your head and now it's on the field a little bit. It will be again as we're recording this today on Thursday, and it will be 3 times next week, and then 3 times for minicamp the week after that, and then unbelievably the next time we see him is going to be training camp at Westfield.
It's creeping up very, very close here. And we'll discuss more about Anthony Richardson because there's one thing he said from Wednesday's practice that I really liked. Obviously, it's great to see him back on the field and with this offense getting, comfortable and in a way reacclimated with his teammates now after missing so much time. One thing that was interesting, though, Georgia, you were mentioning, we were talking about before the show, was what you saw yesterday from the defense. All right, we talked a lot about the offense. Richardson, JT, Pittman back on the field for the first time, really ever, those three. But is it fair to say one of the biggest takeaways from yesterday came on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, the defense, trying to think of the right word. I think I tweeted they were energetic. I think that
Okay.
was the way to go with it. They went right up to the line of like acceptable physicality in shorts and crossed it a couple times. And I think you take that 2 ways, because on the one hand, you're sitting there thinking, man, if they're going to be this physical all year long and they're going to be this much of a problem for offenses, and people are going to be really excited. On the other hand, you got to keep guys up. I think when you're in this time of year, the number one thing you hear coaches yelling is stay up, stay up. And I mean, there was one play where Zaire Franklin straight up tackled Mo Alley Cox. It was a pass over the middle. He came in, he just took him to the ground.
And again, they're just in helmets, right? No shoulder pads, no
Just in
lowers.
helmets, no
Oh boy.
shoulder pads, no, just shorts. It wasn't a vicious hit. I don't want people to think like he came in at full speed. But he came in, he wrapped him up, and he took him to the ground. And it's that kind of thing where you're like, okay, I've seen them do that from time to time when like the rookies are out there, because they're still learning to practice at NFL pace and NFL speed. And you've seen it happen from time to time, unfortunately, when like an undrafted guy's there because they're not going to get as much protection. But these are two starters, and either one of them could get hurt, when that's going on. You've seen plenty of that over the years. Your leg gets twisted while you're making the tackle, your leg gets twisted while you're being tackled, and now all of a sudden you've got a significant injury. And then the Michael Pittman situation, which we can talk about more in depth here in a little bit. That was honestly the least objectionable play by the defense, probably of the day, of the incidents that happened, because they didn't do anything you don't normally do on that one. And Anthony Richardson threw into a crowd. There were probably 5 guys there within a span of 2 or 3 yards, couple defenders, couple receivers. Someone ran the wrong route, clearly, because there shouldn't have been 2 receivers over there in the same spot, over by the sideline. And when the ball went up in that thing, the bodies kind of just all come together. And I think a defender kind of flashed in front of Pittman right at the end of the play. And they banged knees, which was good result the way it turned out. But he was down for a while. And at that point, I think that's when everybody started thinking the defense needs to chill a little bit today, because you had a tackle early. And then after that, Juju Brents kind of got tangled up with Alec Pierce on that same sideline and was almost shoved him into the indoor facility, to the wall of the indoor facility. And that's when Shane Steichen had seen enough. Like he came out and was like, stop, as loud as he could. But I think that I go both ways with that, because nobody got hurt that we know of. Ultimately, that was, like no harm, no foul, I guess, in the end. But you worry about keeping everybody safe in those situations. But I don't want to turn this into the defense wasn't headhunting. Okay. It wasn't, like I said, there's always a balance in any NFL practice, pads or no pads, where the defense is trying to get its work in and set the tone for its mentality and how physical it wants to be, and also trying to protect the offense. And there's always going to be a fine line there. And that's most fights in training camp. That's what they come over, because somebody on the offense thought that the defense took a little bit too many liberties on a play, or somebody, got hurt. I mean, those are usually what starts most fights, whether it's between your own team or whether it's joint practices, which is something else we can talk about coming up, because those have been announced again. But you know, that line is it's always a delicate balance. And I think even when everybody's coming back the way that it is for this Colts team, you're still starting over. It's still a new year. It's still, and you could just kind of see that they were walking that line all day. And when you're doing that, sort of like Bill Belichick, when he was in New England, he was always on the edge of that envelope of what you're allowed to do in anything from the league. And when you're doing that, inevitably you're going to take a step or two over that line every now and again.
No, you're right. And look, clearly, right? Do you want this time of the year? It's May, right? We are recording this on May 23rd. Injuries or staying healthy, I should say, is by far the number one priority whatsoever. I don't care how bad the offense looks or whatever. If AR doesn't complete a pass, the most important thing is coming out of this, OTA mini camp session and getting to training camp fully healthy. With that said, though, I do like the spirited intensity and, almost seemingly chip on the shoulder of the defense, because it does get lost. Like, right, I feel like now with AR back and him and Jonathan Taylor in the same backfield, like that's the offense clearly is going to get a lot of attention. Like, I would argue, George, the defense has more to prove this upcoming year than the offense does, right? Like, we saw what Shane Steichen's offense looks like with a backup quarterback and still very successful. So as long as Anthony Richardson stays healthy, you should assume like that offense should be a pretty damn good, right? And if not, it's on AR. I think at this point going forward here as to why he can't, help elevate this offense compared to what we saw last year. But the defense, right? When we talked about it, defense stunk. Secondary is very young and inexperienced, kind of went through their growing pains. The defensive line is to show they can get consistent pressure on the quarterback. Like, there's a lot to prove on this defense where I do, again, don't want to get it to the point where you're putting guys at risk of getting injured in May. But I do like the fact that they're coming out, even though it's still early in the preseason, and coming out with an edge, with a hunger of trying to prove themselves. I like that a lot, George, because I do think they have a lot to prove this year.
There's no question. And I think, everybody who looks at this roster objectively is going to say, you feel pretty good about the offense. There's questions because there's questions,
Right.
Everywhere. And a lot of it revolves around Richardson in particular, and if he can stay healthy, but that trio that we just talked about earlier, how will they mesh together? You love what it looks like on paper, but it doesn't always come out on the field the same way as you hope it's going to when you're drawing it up this time of year. But there's a lot of optimism about the offense for really good reason. And defense, there's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of people who want to see what can this young secondary do. I think the defensive line people feel really good about because they're obviously very deep and there's a lot of versatility. I think linebackers people feel pretty good about because you've got, veteran guys coming back in Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed. But that secondary has a ton of questions. And I think it's going to be, if the defense as a whole has this chip on their shoulder, might that give those younger guys a little more confidence? I feel like when you play that way, it kind of bleeds through to everybody else, like whatever sport it is, that if the top guy, I guess, the head coach sets the tone for the roster, first of all.
Right.
Whatever his mentality is, they're all going to, follow that lead. But I think the same thing happens within your position groups and your, units, that if the top guys on defense, if Buckner and Franklin and Kenny Moore and Julian Blackman, those guys have a chip on their shoulder and are playing that way, then the rookies and the second year guys are going to follow that lead.
No, you're absolutely right. And also, I don't think it's too early to set a tone. Like, I don't think it's too early to get into a mindset of like, hey, we're going to compete now. And, we're not going to ease into like right now, even though we're adjusting helmets and it's just, the first week of OTAs, we are here to send a message now. I think it does kind of resonate and carry through the summer. It helps give you momentum to training camp. And like, I do think this is like an overall sports thought here. I'm curious your thoughts, George. Like, I don't think it's flipping the switch. I don't think it's as simple as it sounds. Like, oh, okay, we'll kind of coast through OTAs and mini camp, and we're just going to try to not get hurt. And once training camp comes, then we're really going to turn it up, and then we're really going to, try to have that mentality that we want to have for this upcoming season. I don't think it's just as easy as, okay, day one of training camp is here. Okay, that switch is flipped. Like, I think it does, like, it is a progression, and I don't think it could start too early. What do you think about that thought, at least in terms of like not easing your way through and like the switch being flipped being a lot more difficult in all sports than just like how it sounds.
I think that's definitely something you see, like you said, across the board in all sports. But I think it's of particular importance here when you're talking about a franchise that hasn't won a week one game since 2013. So something's got
Good
to
point too.
change in the build up, you know. And obviously Shane's only been around for one of those, and you know they probably performed better in week one than expected last year. They took Jacksonville to the limit, get a break here or there in that game. Who knows? You know, maybe you do end that streak. But at the same time, look at that week one opponent. The schedule did come out. You know, we know now who the Colts are going to play to open the season. And look, Houston's going to come in here with a massive chip on their shoulder because all they've heard, yeah, they went to the playoffs, they won the division, and they won a playoff game. But all they've heard coming out of Indianapolis is we were so close. We should have, you know, won that game. And so if you're Houston, you're going to come in there and oh, that's what you think, you know, we'll show you. And I think from a Colts standpoint, stated goal is to win the division. They're not really shying away from that. If you're going to win the division, you got to beat the Texans at home. I mean, that's one of the massive, most important elements of this. So I don't know, to your point, to finally circle back around to the question you actually asked me, I think that you've got to set that kind of tone from day one, right? I mean, if you're going to go out there and you're going to beat a team as good as Houston in the opening week of the season, I don't think you can be walking through even May 22nd.
And think about it, George. This is the second year in a row for the Colts. They're opening at home against a division opponent, in which that division opponent has something to prove week one right away, right? Remember 2 years ago, the Jaguars surprised everybody winning that division late, really turned it on the second half of the year. Trevor Lawrence, the miracle comeback, beat the Chargers, won a playoff game. And so coming into 2023, they go to Lucas Oil Stadium, proving like last year wasn't a fluke, and now we're the team to beat in this division. Obviously, they played well. At least Calvin Ridley had the hell of a first half in that game. But like, you know, they came in hungry to right away hit the ground running and make a statement. And now Texans, literally the same thing, right? They surprised everyone last year, win the division. They have a great offseason. Everyone's talking them up, maybe, you know, putting them in the Super Bowl discussion and look how great they are. They are coming in hungry, ready to prove something right away. And like you said, you hear all this talk from Indianapolis of, oh, we're so close. We get our quarterback back. Like now we're ready to go. Like they're trying to step on the Colts like they're a cockroach, squish them and kind of put them out right away and send a message. This is our division. Everyone goes through us. So this is, to your point, the week one hex, if you want to call it, that they've been unable to get out of for now a decade. Like that obviously is huge, but also this is a division opponent right away, week number one. I'm with you. Like it's never too early to kind of get your eyes set on. We got to get our mindset going now. We got to kind of set the tone right now. And even though it's still voluntary, which it looked to me, George, correct if I'm wrong, most players, 80% of players were there this week.
Yeah, I think that I don't know of anybody that wasn't. So I mean, and that's how it usually is with this team. You know, they're usually there unless someone's holding out. So it's been or hurt. I mean, those are the only two things that generally keep or suspended. I guess suspended would be the other.
That's true.
In there. So, but none of those three things are happening right now, and everybody's here. But yeah, I mean, it's a time of year where if at any point you could say the NFL is easy, which it never is, but the easiest the NFL gets, which is still pretty difficult, is this time of year. You know, because generally it's classroom stuff. You're learning, you're taking that onto the field, but it's a big time learning period. You know, you're trying to build off whatever you did last year and install the new stuff for next year. And then it's like really it's practice to get ready for training camp, more or less. But to see the Colts taking this as seriously as they are, I just think it speaks to Shane Steichen, who we already knew is a really good head coach, and that he's got them, you know, even this time of year in a mindset of competing and not giving up any snap and that kind of thing. But I think it also speaks to the fact that this is a young and hungry team. None of that necessarily means you're gonna have success when the regular season rolls around. But I think there are things that you want to check off with any team in any sport. I mean, if you're going to tell me this group is young, they're athletic, there's a lot of talent, and they're working their butts off and they're competing their butts off, that's the recipe usually for good things to happen. Doesn't guarantee anything, but it's usually a really good recipe.
You're 100% right about that. And now kind of looking ahead to week number one, you mentioned this after last week's pod. That I think is really interesting, specifically for the Colts and specifically for the first three matchups, because with Anthony Richardson only playing one full game, and missing essentially the rest of the year, um, outside of that, right? The Colts have early on in the season an advantage to where you would think defenses don't really know, right, what this offense is going to look like because they only have one snap on the field and only one play on film of Richardson and Jonathan Taylor in the backfield at the same time. So, like, defenses, you can have an idea, right, of what this Colts offense could look like and what Anthony Richardson could look like now in year number two, but you really don't have an idea. And that works to the Colts' advantage because you look at their first three opponents specifically, Texans, Packers, Bears. Texans, right? There's obviously an entire season's worth of film out on CJ Stroud, and you played them twice last year. Packers, obviously, they didn't play them when Jordan Love was the quarterback. I mean, you have a whole season of film on Jordan Love, so you know what he does well, what this offense looks like. And then week three, Matt Eberflus, you obviously know what his defense, what to expect from a Matt Eberflus-led defense. So you could argue, George, and I think not even argue, this is the fact, the Colts have an advantage the first 3 weeks of the year because there is still a state of unknown with this offense, whereas their opponents, you know what to expect from the Texans, you know what to expect from the Packers, and you know what to expect from the Bears. That should lead, in theory, to like a 2-1 start to the season out of these three games.
Yeah. And just to add to that, Anthony Richardson on yesterday was talking about how their minds are always spinning. He's always talking with Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter and Cam Turner and all the offensive coaches really, and they're just within individual plays. Hey, what if we do this on this route? What if we change this up here? What if we use this motion or this cadence or whatever? And then even looking around the league and trying to find other plays. Hey, what if Philly did this? What if we did it this way? We could take this piece of that. Or, Kansas City in the Super Bowl. Did you see that? If we run it this way, it could work for us. It's not necessarily the same play, but it's some element of it came
Right.
in. And I think you add that on top of the fact that you don't know what it's going to look like with Jonathan Taylor, and you don't know what Michael Pittman's going to do. And that the year of tape that you have of this offense in period shows that Shane Steichen's going to change things up pretty drastically from week to week, based on the opponent and based on personnel that's available. I think all those things together really give the Colts an advantage in those first 3 weeks because I don't think that the opposition can possibly prepare for everything that's coming at them. They're not going to know how Jonathan Taylor is going to mesh in this. They're not going to know how Richardson's going to look with these weapons around him. But they also can't predict whatever those conversations between Richardson and Steichen were like that week. What did they see? And I think what deepens that with these three opponents in particular, you were talking, except for Eberflus, about the offenses, which is a big deal. They obviously know Houston very well. They obviously have enough tape on Green Bay to prepare for that. Defensively, Houston clearly is the San Francisco 49ers tree. They saw them twice last year, moved the ball pretty well against a Houston defense that was really good in both games. So, you feel decent about where you stand. Like, obviously got to execute on field, but you feel decent about where you stand, from a schematic standpoint there. And then Green Bay's new defense coordinator comes from that 49ers tree. It's probably going to be a very similar defensive set as far as what they saw in the first week, which is you don't want to see a totally different defense week 2 from week 1. I mean, nobody. You love the fact that you're just going to come in, and then week 3 you're playing a defense, a coordinator that was in this building for 4 or 5 years, and a defense that they ran for a good portion of time. So I think that helps too. Not only are those defenses not as familiar with what the Colts are going to do offensively, the Colts should be very familiar with what those defenses are going to try to do against them.
No, you're right. And it's like right now, for the first, like, I think once the first 3 games come and go, then obviously the book is out a little bit and teams can have an idea of the tendencies of the Colts. But those first 3 games, like, it feels like the Colts have the advantage where they're kind of hiding in the woods. their opponent is out there in the open. They can't see them, but the Colts, they can't see the Colts. Colts can see them. They're a little bit of camouflage here. That should work to their advantage and give them a leg up, even if the Texans, you could argue, are a little bit more talented and obviously definitely more proven. And the Packers winning a playoff game, same thing, more proven. And the Bears have a lot of talent, right? They're kind of in the same boat as the Colts where they have talent. Now it's so you can put it all together. It's those small differences can really help determine, in these close games, who wins and who loses. And hopefully for the Colts, like you said, that the first 3 games here, when there's really not much out there in terms of film to prepare for, it gives the Colts the leg up. It's also interesting too, George, because you had Anthony Richardson yesterday, on Wednesday, I should say, talk about his playing style. And a very popular discussion we've had in the regular season last year, in the off season last year. We've not heard Anthony Richardson talk about it too much, but just to read directly what he said when it comes to his playing style. Anthony Richardson said, quote, "I don't think there's anything wrong with my playing style." End quote. And then there's some other things where it's thought this season-ending injury was more unlucky than unwise, to paraphrase there. George, sounds pretty similar to stuff you said and I said, where it's more bad luck than it is bad decision-making / harmful play style. Safe to say, the handcuffs, if you will not be on Anthony Richardson when it comes to running the ball and being as dynamic of a player as he possibly can be.
Absolutely. And he said pretty much the same thing in January when the season was ended. And he met with us after Chris Ballard. I've slept a lot since then, so it's hard to remember exactly, in January, but I remember him coming out and getting asked that early on and saying, essentially the same thing. It was worded a little bit differently. But that, he doesn't feel like he's reckless. I think he was asked specifically then about whether he was reckless. And he said, and I tend to agree with him. Like you said, it's a lot of the same things we've been saying on the pod that he echoed. I always kind of laugh because he's incredibly honest all the time. I mean, he's a guy that really wears his heart on his sleeve. And he said straight up, the one that's on me is the concussion. I can't slow up going in the end zone. So even to that point, he says everything that we've been saying on this podcast. But I don't think he's wrong. And I've said this for a little while, and I feel this way, wholeheartedly. People continually talk about how reckless Anthony Richardson is and ignore how reckless Will Levis is. Levis is significantly more reckless than Richardson. It's just sort of the will of the football gods. Now, we can go back through data, and ultimately the running quarterbacks have had trouble playing full seasons. There's no question about it. I mean, whether it's Justin Fields or Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, miss at least a game or two pretty much every year because you're going to get banged up. But I also think, one of the things AR said in that is that people look at him and they think he's, huge because he is. And so he's going to run all the time, and he doesn't look to run first. I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but he's still gonna throw the ball first. That's always in his mindset. So I don't know how much you compare him to the running quarterbacks in the past, in the sense that that's not his primary option. I think it's going to be more. I mean, again, we're projecting just like these defenses. The question we just talked about, we're projecting his style, but I feel like from what we have seen, it's going to be more like Patrick Mahomes in terms of he's athletically much more gifted as a runner than Mahomes. But Mahomes only really runs when he has to. And you look at, he's very effective when he does because of it. Because when he takes off, defenses aren't necessarily ready for it, or he'll do it when nothing else is working, when the receivers aren't catching the ball, or, they've got Jason Kelsey a little bit too much covered, whatever. Travis Kelsey. Jason Kelsey would be interesting running routes.
That would be fun. Sign me up for that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's available, right? He's
He
got eligibility left. But
does.
I think you're going to see more of that mindset from Richardson. It's not going to look the same on the field, but I think he's going to run more when the situation calls for it. And then obviously the RPO stuff is a whole other element that's going to add. That's where the Lamar Jackson element comes in. But I
Right.
think when we're just talking about drop back passes, there are quarterbacks, Justin Fields at the top of the list, who seem to be wanting to run more early in that down. Maybe one read or two reads, and then I'm going. That's not who AR is. That's not the way he plays the game.
We talked about it like this time last year, right? When you actually dig into the Florida film, because you go in there, you look at his size, look at his speed. It's like, okay, this guy is just, like you said, Michael Vick 2.0. He's going to, try to run one read and go. And it's like, even when he scrambles, his eyes look just like Mahomes remain down the field. He'll go in the limited window we saw. He goes from 1 to 2 to 3, maybe back to 1. Scramble, keep the eyes down the field. One of the best highlights of the year, maybe the best play he made this year on that touchdown pass to Mo Alley-Cox when he's rolling out. Like, he's rolling out of the pocket and throwing. He didn't look to run there. He still kept his eyes down the field, saw Mo going across the sideline or going across the field against the Rams and hit him for a 35-yard touchdown. That was a thing of beauty. And so it's like, I'm with you in the sense that, I mean, the playing style doesn't have to change because the injuries, we both agree with AR, are more fluky, we'll say, than it was a product of him just recklessly throwing his body at grown men that are running, 4-4 right into his chest or right into his knee. But it's also like the fact that he's right. I don't think he's going to be running 10 times a game. He's not going to be Lamar Jackson where he's going to be leading his team in rush attempts every single year. He may, some games may change, but I'm with you. Like, you'll have RPOs called for sure. But even when he's, like you even mentioned with the 2-ball drill, you can have an RPO where AR keeps it, rolls out, but you kind of see like Auburn ran this offense, a few other, like you see it more in college, where it's like, instead of just like, oh, I'm going to hand it off or keep it, it's I'm going to hand it off, keep it, or I could throw it and as you're rolling out, keep your eyes on the field and try to fire it down there. I expect that to be a big part of this offense as well, George, where again, you can use AR's feet, but at the same time, use his running threat to open up passing lanes to make explosive plays, but also keep AR healthy as well. There's definitely a balance here, but it's a balance that should work in the Colts' favor big time.
We talked about it last year during the season, the way that the Ravens used Lamar last year. He still ran a lot, and he was so very effective, but they kind of picked and chose where those runs happened and, tried to call things maybe closer to the sideline where he could get out, if defense gets in there, things like that. So I think if you I think it's got to follow more of that pattern. His decision making, I think, is where it needs to be. I don't think you have to worry about that, and that's where it starts. Yeah, I would argue Will Levis's decision making is not where it needs to be, and he needs to probably think a little more before he gets into some of the situation he gets himself into. But I think, from a should I go or should I stay standpoint, I think AR is where he needs to be. I think he makes the right call, and so then it comes down to Shane being smart about when he calls those quarterback runs, and when are they going to be the most effective? When's it going to hurt the defense the most? You're not going to be 100% on that. No one is, but I think you try to pick and choose the best you can there. And I thought Baltimore struck a really good balance with that last year. And I guarantee you, they watch everything from everybody at every level. I guarantee you the Colts have watched that and are taking whatever they feel is relevant from it.
Absolutely. Like I said, you pick and choose, pick some of Josh Allen's plays, pick some of Jalen Hurts' plays, take some of Lamar's plays. Here, so Lamar Jackson, right, got a lot of attention this year for slimming down. You want to become slimmer, a little bit more, I guess we'll say faster and more agile, if that's even possible. I'm not even sure if that's possible, George. I mean, let me tell you, the one thing I didn't think of when I watched Lamar run is, man, that guy can be more agile. He's really got to get back into shape.
He needs a little more speed.
So I don't know who's in his camp telling him that, but that's his goal, to get faster and more agile. Is that something like the Colts have to think about with Anthony Richardson at some point? Like, he is on, he's not. He's big, but he's also muscular. I don't see a reason if you're the Colts to like start thinking about that, but do you?
No, I don't think so yet. I mean, one of the things I kept talking about that I really think is important. He turned 22 yesterday. So
crazy. Happy birthday.
Still, right. He's still very young. He's younger than Caitlin Clark. I mean, just to put that in perspective, she's the rookie on the other side of town. He's younger than she is. So I think, he's still growing into his adult body, for lack of a better word. You're not quite all the way there yet in physical development. So I don't think you want to mess with anything like slimming down or adding on or anything until that process is finished. And so after that, we'll see. And I think it's one of those things that, as you go through the league, maybe, I don't know. I'm not over in Baltimore. Maybe Lamar thinks he's trying to fight back some of the effects of aging here this way. Like, you know, the longer you're in the league, the more, because I know a guy like that at that level, if you lose a quarter of a step, it's probably in your head. The rest of us probably don't even notice. But when you're that elite the way he is, you probably thinking, I got to get that back, and I ran a 10-2 and I got to get back to a 10-1 because this is unacceptable. That's the only thing that's the only rationale I can think of. AR's not in that kind of anywhere near that point yet. So, is it something that down the line they'll talk about year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8? Possibly. And it depends probably on how things go and what they feel like he needs to do to be successful.
Give me a heat check there. Lamar trying to fight off the aging process as he is someone who is 27 years old.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
I,
I know what you mean. But
and you think about it in terms of running backs, because that's the area we're talking about with him. The running backs, when you look at the really good running backs, that's the age where they start to, okay, what do I need to do to stay on the field? What do I need to do to make sure I have that third gear or that fourth gear? Because the NFL age is not real life. I mean, let's be honest.
no,
At
yeah, the fact that
35, you're
Ezekiel
ancient.
Elliott and I are the same age, but he's basically in the old timers home. I'm like, my goodness gracious.
It's
Couldn't
just
make
life. It really isn't. And that's what I think, like, because I think at that level, they do. I mean, because the margin is so slim in this league, you do worry about, I lost a tenth of a second on, this play. I used to be able to get here. I was at this mark at this point, and now I'm not. How do I get it back?
No, you're right. You're right. And that's you make a really good point in terms of like letting AR grow into his body, which is still great. Like it's still
Mm,
so mind-blowing to say, but you're right. He's not done growing. He's not done fully, adjusting to his body and getting comfortable and really kind of knowing who he is. So I think it's a really good observation in the sense of like you can't really change anything for at least a few years to see how he plays. What his, maybe he plays better, bigger, and maybe that's just going to, help keep him healthier and be a more powerful guy versus being like Lamar, where you kind of want to be more like I mean, I guess you want to be more like a track star. At
which
this
is
point
crazy.
in, yeah, feels unfair. You
He's
thought defense
already
was
the
hard.
fastest quarterback in the league, like on the field, like eye test. I mean, you talk to the defenses, they'll tell you Lamar is the fastest guy. And now he's faster. Like I don't know how you deal with that.
No, I don't either. And let me tell you, I'm glad I don't get paid to try to tackle Lamar because I'd be out of a job ASAP. That is for sure.
I think
Um,
I would get hurt just thinking about trying to tackle Lamar Jackson.
you have nightmares of just you and him in the open field, and he's just, and then all of a
I,
sudden he moves and you're on your back getting juked out.
if that happened in a dream, I would wake up with like, a calf injury. I'm pretty sure.
And night sweats. That's
Yeah, definitely night sweats.
holy cow. Really fast. What do you think AR did for his birthday? 22nd birthday, Memorial Day weekend too, by the way,
Huh?
which is a good time to be turning 22. What are you
Yep.
thinking here for AR? How does he spend the big 2-2?
It was pretty funny because he said, like he got to spend the first half with his teammates and the second half with his other family, which, would be his family.
Real family?
But I like the way he worded that though, because, it's not gonna look, his teammates are also his family. So we're gonna keep them on the same level. But he said he doesn't usually do much for his birthday, which I wonder, like, I don't know about you, but the people in my life that are as like giving as he is, because you've seen him all the time. I don't think anybody listening to this is unaware of how many times he's done something incredibly kind for a fan he doesn't know. That he just met literally on, say, 465, and gets him a tire and takes him around. That's probably the most famous one. But I feel like every day on social media you see, oh, I saw AR at wherever, and he stopped and he took photos, or he signed this for me, or he did whatever. The people like that in my life that are really tend to like not celebrate their birthday. Like it's almost like they don't want that coming back their way. They almost are uncomfortable if they're not the giver. And I kind of get that from him, that's sort of his personality. But I do wonder, I mean, he was at poll day for the Indy 500. He was obviously at several Pacer games, still wearing his Tyrese Halliburton jersey. He went to Gainbridge Fieldhouse when the Gators were here in the NCAA tournament. Like he's starting to get more settled into his home. I feel like he's starting to be a little bit more a citizen of Indianapolis. So, does he have a favorite restaurant now? I mean, did he go out, and at least because you feel like at the very least he needed to like get St. Elmo's, right? Something like that.
The St. Elmo's, do they serve gator by any chance? Do they have any gator meat on the
Don't
menu?
know. They
As a
might.
Gainesville
That's a
native,
good
I'm
question.
assuming, right? Like fried gator.
Yeah.
You got to think that's on the menu.
Fricasseed. That's a good question. I don't know. I know
Fly
they've
that
got
delicate. If they
plenty of
don't,
steak
get it on the menu.
and shrimp in the shrimp cocktail. I mean, that's everybody in Indy, right? I mean, all of a sudden McDonald's got gator tail. Like you can find a way to get AR in here. Get
You're
him establishment.
whatever he wants, man. Make sure you have it ready. That's good for him. I'm in this stage of my life now where everyone around me is turning 30. So as you can imagine, they're all big to-dos
Mm.
and all, big extravaganzas. So yeah, it is refreshing when it's someone's like, hey, you know what? I don't want to make it about me, so we're not going to do anything. Or if we do something, I want to make sure that everyone, you're okay with it. I, I appreciate that, AR. I appreciate that. And hopefully keep that going. I'm sure your friends in your life when you turn 30 will be hoping you keep that same mentality.
He's also, don't forget, he's got like a newborn too. So
That's
I'm sure that plays into, that kind of, I'm sure you have friends in plenty of that situation as well.
yes.
That changes your plans too a little bit.
You're right. No more late nights. That's for sure. And going home whenever the hell you want. Yeah. A little different when you got a responsibility at
Mhm.
home. That is, you're
And
right about that.
and his little brother, he's been responsible for him for a long time. It's one of the things we talked about last spring. Like he's been, a mentor and kind of a father figure for his brother since like at least AR was in high school. So I think he's just got a different mentality. We talked about last year when he got here. He's kind of an old soul in some ways, a very mature guy. So um I think he said it was kind of low key. I trust him on that one. I think he's probably telling the truth.
You're not gonna be a Pat McAfee falling into the river.
That'd be a shocker. I mean, you always sit there and you think like, what can shock me anymore about this league? Because you see, I don't know, it feels like yearly at least there's something that happens. You're like, I never thought I would be covering this. That might be right at the top of the list right now.
Hey, I mean, I never thought we'd be watching a golf major where the best golfer in the world is getting arrested the morning of his round. Um, yes, sports is doing a great job overall of really just taking away the shock effect of just like, oh, you thought you've seen it all. Hold on, wait till with what we've got in store for you today. It's been wild. Yeah, AR staying out of that. I'm with you. Please, please. The less shocked we are, the better here on the pod.
I mean, the Minnesota Timberwolves are in the conference finals. I mean, this is like what second time ever? The sports world's in a crazy place.
It is. Although the last time they were in the conference finals, 04, Colts quarterback had a pretty decent year.
And the Pacers were in the Eastern Finals that year too. So I mean,
Oh,
things are coming together. You think here?
oh, we feeling a big breakout year two for Anthony Richardson?
I mean, obviously he's gonna set the touchdown record, right? I mean that's the way this works. We're just going on precedent here. Science.
I guess Michael Pittman Jr. could take over the Brandon Stokely role.
Why not? That feels like more Josh Downs, doesn't it?
Okay,
You
yeah, I
still play
like
on this
it.
team. Put
I
Josh
do like
Downs.
that. All right.
So and Pierce can split the Reggie Wayne role, and then Pitt can be Harrison, and off they go.
Wow. A lot of similarities. I like it, George. If we can get 04 back in 2024, sign me up. Let's go.
Let's keep those doing a good job. Keep those expectations low for AR here. Like, oh, for Peyton Manning.
Yeah, no big deal. We just expect you to have one of the greatest regular seasons ever.
Yeah.
Good luck, buddy. Don't fail us now. All right.
Hang in there, kid.
Last thing here before we do get out of here and get you off to your Memorial Day weekend, George, is this safety position, right? Has been a big talking point. We assume, even though we are getting to MDW, that the Colts will make at some point a veteran safety signing. All the big names headlined by Justin Simmons, no one's gotten signed, so they're all out there still. But George, you witnessed something at practice this week that if the Colts maybe don't make a move, maybe the end of the world is not here. What'd you see OTAs this week?
Yeah, Daniel Scott made an interception with the ones against Anthony Richardson,
Uh-oh.
pass intended for Mo Alley Cox. And Scott's the unknown in all this, right? I mean, we've seen Rodney Thomas, we've seen Nick Cross. They both have upside still. We don't know who either one of them are. We're not closing the book on either one of these guys. I am calling, I'm signing Lamar Jackson up for AARP at 27, but I'm not going to close the book on these two. But Daniel Scott didn't play last year. I mean, rookie, he hurt his knee. He was out the whole year. I kept hearing from defensive coaches throughout the year that, hey, we like this guy. And they weren't saying he's going to be a Pro Bowler. They weren't saying he's going to be outstanding. But they really like what they've seen from him. And Shane Steichen echoed that again yesterday. He's a super intelligent guy that, they just really like the way he competes. And so I think when he goes out there, and he gets a pick, and the first time that we're able to watch him practice, take it for what you want. It's shorts, it's helmets, second practice of OTAs. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad sign. I mean, ultimately, what does it mean? We'll see. But I think it's telling of that competition is real. That it's second day of OTAs and he's getting reps with the ones. Let you know that they're going to look at all three of those guys, and it's not just Cross versus Thomas. So we'll see where they go with that. The other rookie that deserves a little bit of mention is Jalen Carlisle, the linebacker, converted safety. We know Chris Ballard's track record of drafting linebackers has been amazing. We know
You could
Gus
say
Bradley
that.
in his defense has a really good history with taking these kind of hybrid safety linebacker guys and getting them in the right spot, making them successful in the league. He had an interception on Joe Flacco where he leapt about 2 feet in the air to pick off the ball. And, Steichen said afterwards, like, one thing Shane does, you'll see him doing this at practice, always behind the quarterback. And he's taking that play with the quarterback in his head. Like, he's running through, he's watching the way the defense goes. And he's, thinking, okay, I would throw it here. I would, make this decision. That way, when a quarterback comes back, they could talk about it. Like, hey, I was thinking this. Why did you think that? Or, he said he was at the same read as Flacco, was going to try the same throw, just throw it over the linebacker there. And the kid made an outstanding play. So, early signs from Jalen Carlisle that maybe, he can help this football team too. He's not going to beat out Zaire Franklin or EJ Speed, but there are definitely, I would think maybe that role that Ronnie Harrison was playing before the safeties got hurt and he moved back there is something you could see from Carlisle this year. If he can get there. I mean, it's not given anything, and they're not going to say, hey, day 2 of OTAs and you made an interception. You're now, guaranteed role on this team, but moving in the right direction. I always like to say that for rookies and young guys.
And it highlights two things that we're going to keep an eye on big time here when it comes to the defense. And that's kind of depth and splash plays, right? We talk about explosive playmakers mostly from the offensive perspective, but it works with the defense as well. And those are two guys right there making, again, OTAs, but making an interception, splash play, making a name for yourself to where even if they aren't getting on the field as a starter, God forbid if injuries happen, because we know the injury rate in the NFL is 100%, everyone's getting hurt, someone's going down at some point. The depth is definitely important. And I think that should be bolstered by a veteran for sure, especially at safety. But again, it's to have someone like Daniel Scott in there pushing to where bare minimum, even if he's not winning a starting spot, but making Rodney Thomas and or Nick Cross better, it's just all about competition. Iron sharpens iron. And again, like you said, very early, shorts, t-shirts, it's May 23rd here. We're not going to get too crazy. But it is good to see so far that at least splash plays are being made and that it seems like at least the depth behind the starters is still going to be, strong. We're talking total drop off. And your team is hopeless at that position because there's just no one else that is competent. You really hope, that God forbid if something bad does go down, the Colts are equipped. It's a slow process, right? Sometimes, again, I think Chris Ballard is maybe taking some positions for granted too much and health for granted too much. Hopefully with these two, a linebacker and safety, you're starting to see that competitive depth really show up here early on in the year.
Which, like you said, is a good thing. Ultimately, does it even lead to one win in the regular season? We don't know. But it's better than, everybody looking terrible and you're wondering what you're going to do with those spots. So, good signs, good early vibes from this team. One thing we did learn yesterday, breaking news, Marvin Harrison Jr. is coming to Westfield after all. The Cardinals will be here for joint practices ahead of their game. We don't have any dates on this yet. We do know the game with Arizona is August 17th. So the best guess would be that those practices would be the 14th and 15th, just because that's the way it usually works. And then they'll have 1 day of practice with the Bengals, which that one, uh, you can't exactly pinpoint, but when he says 1 day, it almost certainly means August 20th. The game's on the 22nd. So we'll see how that works out. But quick trip if fans want to go on a training camp road trip. Cincinnati's just down the road. But I also think, it'll be interesting. You got some good offensive weapons to see. The defense gets a look at a lot of reps in those team drills. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr., for that secondary to guard. And then Joe Burrow theoretically be healthy and be out there throwing
That's
against
true.
them in Cincinnati. So, I don't know. I just think that's always fun, the joint practices, and I think those are a couple of interesting matchups.
Like we called George back all off season. Marvin Harrison Jr. will be in Westfield come training camp. But if we said that, he'll be in Westfield in August. Lock it up. Cash those tickets, George. We were right.
We'll
Now
be there.
we're in a different shade of red, or a shade of red that we didn't really anticipate. But hey, there you go. Nonetheless, he will be at the Colts facility at training camp.
I did have somebody on Twitter say they need to pull a parent trap here. Find somebody who looks kind of like Harrison. I think, hey, it's worth just signing a guy at that point, right? Go find somebody who sort of looks like Marvin Harrison Jr. Make the swap. No one will be any the wiser.
If there was an owner in the league that would, essentially, let's call it for what it is, take a player hostage and try to pass off someone else as that person, it would be Jim Irsay, and it would have to do with, one of a luminary's son, right?
Bring that motor coach back to training camp this year. They both come in, little jersey swap, send them back out on the field.
Listen, Jonathan Gannon, we got Marv in the RV. We're not giving him back. I got picks. If you want the motor coach, you can take it off my hands. It's yours. But we ain't getting them back. So tell us, or we ain't giving them back. Tell us what you want.
Yeah,
Man, you talk about 2 years in a row. All eyes on the motor coach and who's in there and how long they're talking for. This one I think would be even somehow more noteworthy and controversial than last year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Roger Goodell might get involved in that one.
We have the National Guard flying in too. And that could be that you want to talk about shock? That could be one that does deliver a little bit of a shock factor. That would be my
That
goodness.
surpasses AR in the canal for sure. That one
Yes.
definitely is more. But what this means is you got to be there for joint practices, right? To see if Marvin Harrison Jr. is kidnapped by the Colts. The
Not
only
to
way
see
know is
him
to be
in the
there.
flesh and maybe get a chance to see his dad walking around the facility and walking around
No chance
practice.
of that.
Yeah, just see if he's gonna make it back on the Cardinals team bus or not and go back to the hotel. Oh boy, that is gotta love Jim Irsay. Gotta love him. What are we doing this weekend for Memorial Day, George? How are we celebrating the first kickoff weekend of the summer?
I'm going to the race. I mean, that's what I got to do here in Indy. So, gonna be out there. We'll see how that all goes. Weather not looking good right now. It's a little scary. Gonna be tight for Kyle Larson. He's got that what,
That's
like
right.
10 minutes or something in there where he can leave the speedway and get to Charlotte. But they're calling for early morning showers right now. We'll see how it goes. Get that track dry, get that window for 101 laps, and get the race in. But I don't know. I'll tell you, I'm excited about there because being my age and being somebody who grew up loving baseball, pace car driver is Ken Griffey Jr.
Oh, I didn't
So
see that. That's
pretty
pretty
excited about this.
cool. That is pretty cool. You assume he's got the backwards hat on.
You got to, right? If not, it'll be very disappointing.
You
His
wear the
son
helmet?
was actually in Indy with the Colts for like 2 days or 3 days. He was here for a rookie mini camp. He was a tryout guy. Trey Griffey was played at Arizona State. So that's probably the biggest media scrum ever for a tryout guy I can remember that happened just because like, hey, Ken Griffey Jr.'s kid's here.
That would be pretty cool to see him at if he made the team, see Ken Griffey at the games.
Mm-hmm.
Would be pretty cool. Very nice. All right. Well, fingers crossed, George. I feel like Memorial Day, I feel like in recent years has gotten progressively worse. And it's like, I feel like
Yeah.
when 10 years ago, I feel like it was like at least sunny and nice every single year. And now it just feels like it's cloudy. Here comes the rain, cold weather. Not great. Fingers crossed, George. We got to get the racers on there, right? The Pacers are playing. We got to get the racers out there.
Pacers in the race, and Pacers on either side of race day too. So it's going to be another crazy
Sandwich.
Saturday night and Monday. Saturday night, we got our first Pacers and Caitlin Clark at the same time. Well, there's like a half hour between them. And the Pacers play at like 8:30 and the Fever play at 9. So, it's gonna be another one of those weekends in Indy. Lots of energy. Juju talked about that, by the way, because he's an Indy guy. Juju Brents
Yeah.
grew up in Indianapolis. Said he was sick about the way the Pacers game ended.
Should be.
Should be. I mean,
Should
he's
be.
about handing gift wrapping a game, but that's a whole other podcast. So,
At least Rick Carlisle took blame. I'll give him credit. He didn't blame the refs
this time
or the free throw discrepancy.
he just the people were on that, and I was like, there were at least 4 things they did in the last minute of that game that were in their control that altered the outcome. Like if you don't do them, you're going to win. But that's, like I said, that's a whole other podcast. Juju is all about that. But he also said he's going to be in the 500 parade. So I mean, he's reached that level of celebrity now. And then give shout out to Caitlin Clark. But I think the Colts feel the energy in the city. I think it's good for everybody in the city when you have sort of this sports energy that's going on right now. It's a hop in time in Indy.
I believe like all, high tide raises all boats. And I think it's good, right? Like I said, everyone's jacked up about Caitlin Clark. Everyone's jacked up about the Pacers, Indy 500s here. Like that energy, I think you said, like especially now when it's still infancy stages of the 2024 season for the Colts, I think it only helps to just add another log or two on the fire. Just like you see how jumping the city is now. Imagine come January if the Colts have a home playoff game or two, like it just gives you that extra motivation of just like, and almost a preview of like, this is really fun. Imagine, how we can make this city go if we're in this position, like the Pacers are in, 6 months from now. So I'm with you. I think it's a great, I love it. When cities overall, I kind of see it here in New York with the Knicks and the Rangers, although RIP to the Knicks. And unfortunately, the Knicks, I'll still say success, Rangers success has not carried over to the Mets, George. It has not carried over whatsoever. Your Sox, my Mets. Let me tell you what they're doing. They're making this summer easy because we can just focus on the Colts. We can focus on the NBA playoffs, and baseball is almost an afterthought. So I guess in that way, thank you.
I think baseball season. I think the White Sox were eliminated second week of the regular season. I feel like from playoff contention,
earliest ever.
Yeah, I mean it was rough, but hey, Garrett Crochet's on a tear, so look out, they're coming.
Look
2035 Sox, look out.
Tony La Russa will be back for his 5th managerial stint.
Oh, jeez, I can't rule that out. That would be
wheel him out there.
On that scale of shocking things, La Russa in a wheelchair managing the Sox in 2035, honestly, not that high on the list.
3 out of 10.
Not as it should be.
As long as Jerry Reinsdorf is the owner, yeah, that probability and possibility is always there for sure. All right. Have a great holiday weekend. Enjoy the race. Enjoy the hoops. We will take a week off. My schedule's a little wonky next week. So our plan is to be back next Monday ahead of mandatory minicamp. So we'll do a little recap of the final OTAs, get you set for the mandatory portion of the offseason where, like George mentioned before, everyone's there now, but everyone will force to be there 2 weeks from now. So next Monday, we will be back ready to go. So have a great weekend. Have a great week. Happy early summer. We'll talk to you right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.